Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Weight Neutral Nutrition Podcast. My name is Devin Dirksen, and I'm your host today. Thank you for joining us on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, welcome to the audio show. I have a really special guest with me today. Her name is Becca King. She is a dietitian specializing in ADHD and nutrition for ADHD people. So welcome to the show, Becca. We're super excited to chat with you. And do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this and a little bit about your philosophy?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have been, I guess, a dietitian for 3 years now, 4 years. But I feel like a lot of dietitians when I was in grad school, started a cute little food Instagram, and it was just like food pictures and stuff, and then kind of stopped doing it. And I took my first job in weight loss, which was like not the place for me. But I was like, oh, I can get around diet culture and I can still help people with their relationship with food here. I was very, very, very wrong about that. Um, and then right around the time of the pandemic, we actually had a client who was bulimic, and I was like, this is really wrong. Like, we shouldn't be seeing someone with a serious eating disorder for weight loss. And they were like, well, her BMI is XYZ, so she has to, by those standards, she can't, she is a candidate for weight loss. And I was like, no, like, this is wrong. And I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was like, there are a lot of eating disorder clinics in this city and in this area. And that's where she should be getting care, not here. And they were kind of like, well, if you won't see everyone, then maybe you should kind of find another job. And I was like, okay, and then the pandemic happened and I had to take some time off of work, and they passed unemployment stuff. So when I was out for a while I was sick, when that happened, I was like, they called me back and I was like, can I just not come back to work? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, yes. But I broke up with a toxic boyfriend or something. And then started just thinking about it. It was like, this is kind of an ideal time to get into the virtual practice space. And I was just kind of thinking about who I wanted to work with. I knew I wanted to do intuitive eating, anti-diet stuff. I just didn't know who I wanted to work with. So I was thinking about my own relationship with food and working with a really good friend on hers. And I was like, there's this whole ADHD component here that nobody is talking about. And so I did a little market research in some Facebook groups, and for women with ADHD, and almost all of them said they struggled with binge eating. And at the time, back in 2020, the only really ADHD resources for nutrition were for kids. And it was very eat this, not that, how to deal with eating on stimulants. And that was kind of it. And, or dietary things to quote unquote help with ADHD. And it was just this is it. What happens when these kids become adults? They still have ADHD and they now have to feed themselves. It's a whole nother added layer of things. I was like, wow. So I was like, I'm just going to see if this is helpful, and started talking about it on social media. And I obviously had a lot of free time during COVID to kind of dig a lot deeper and learn more about ADHD just beyond my own personal experience. And kind of took off, and people were like, oh my gosh, finally someone was speaking my language. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think that that's a really important thing to talk about because you're right. Even I'm not a dietitian, but when I took my nutrition diploma, it was very much kids with ADHD shouldn't eat sugar and shouldn't eat all these other things. And it's yeah, first of all, as a parent trying to deal with that, that's really tough to navigate. And then once you get older, it's not like you're going to never eat sugar again just
Yeah.
because you have ADHD. And then, like you said, I feel like that compounds into all these other diet culture things for when we're adults.
Yeah. And it's a lot of, even beyond the sugar, there's a lot of almost clean eating vibes there, where you're just most likely if a kid has ADHD, there's a good chance at least one of the parents, if not both, have ADHD as well. And cooking is challenging for a lot of people who have ADHD. So it's telling someone that everything they need to make or feed their kids needs to be basically made from scratch or like as unprocessed as possible is just like really unrealistic. And just for most parents, like people are busy and spending hours, like it's not easy to prepare everything from scratch for every single meal and snack. And then it just adds like another layer of guilt for a lot of, I think, parents and adults too. Of like, I quote unquote should be able to do this because it seems like something that might be easy, but it's oftentimes it's not.
Yeah, totally. So you said that you had found that a lot of ADHDers as adults struggle with binge eating. Is there a reason for that? Have you kind of dived into some research on that, or is it just kind of like something we're beginning to understand?
I would say it's like something we're kind of beginning to understand. There is like there is a genetic. There's some new research that came out I think it was last week actually, that there is a genetic component with ADHD and there is a genetic component with eating disorders as well. So that's something that's kind of already there. But then for people who have ADHD, their brains are lower in dopamine. So our brains are constantly seeking out stimulation, and carbs, especially, and food is stimulating. And it's a pretty accessible and low effort. Like it's pretty easy to just open up something and eat it, versus doing like exercise or something that might be a little bit more energy intensive to get dopamine. And I think especially during COVID and the pandemic of being at home and having less access to things, food kind of became something that a lot of people started to rely more on as a source of stimulation. I work with a lot of women who aren't diagnosed until later in life. So for them, a lot of them would say like, oh, I'm always constantly eating, throughout the day. And it's like, I'm just a boredom eater. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why I was doing this. And then, oh, it was because my brain was looking for stimulation, because like emotional eating or any other thing that's out there didn't really necessarily like connect with them. So like I just could never figure out why. I wasn't hungry. I just needed that, like I need that dopamine basically. So I think that's a piece of it. And ADHDers just in general don't necessarily have the best interoceptive awareness. So it's harder to like, even if you're not medicated, pick up and act on body cues. Like I know in intuitive eating, like they talk about like when you have the cue to go to the bathroom, right? They're like, you just get up and go. And most ADHDers will laugh at you. Like whenever I tell my clients that, they're like, yeah, no, I will, especially if I'm hyper focused, I will wait until I have to run to the bathroom. And the same thing with eating, like you might not notice hunger cues until you're ravenous and you need food like right now. And obviously it's really hard to eat mindfully, to eat intentionally even. And you just want the quickest, fastest thing that you can get at that point. And usually it's like, that's not the food choice I would have made. Or even if you plan something out, it might not be, that's not what you would have planned to eat. It's just your body kind of in a survivalish mode. So.
Yeah, totally. And I've definitely seen this myself with clients who have ADHD. I don't specifically work with people with ADHD, but they come. And I've never like seen a therapist or anything, but I'm just like, oh yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, that's me. Like I am the person who will wait all day. I mean, I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten. And I know, like, obviously I know that I should, but sometimes it just gets away from you, right? You're just like, oh, I need to stock the fridge with a cheese stick so that I can just eat something without having to cook it.
Yeah. Lots of low effort. I talk a lot about that with my clients, like finding low effort foods or things that like you can literally open and eat. Like, you don't need to, make an elaborate snack or do something complex for every meal.
Yeah. So along those lines, like what are other tips that you have for your ADHD or clients on like how to make it so that maybe they don't feel super in tune with hunger cues, but like, maybe not every day getting to that point of being ravenous and then binge eating, right?
Yeah, I think the first step is making sure you're eating consistently or trying to. A lot of ADHDers don't like the word consistency, so I've started using like regularly a little bit more, because ADHDers are consistently inconsistent. So when someone's like, just be consistent, it's like, that's just not part of who we are. But trying to eat like every 3 to 4 hours, I think can be very helpful. Just so that you're not getting to that point of excessive hunger, even if it's something small. And I have a client is actually funny. She's like, I've been really focusing on this, and she normally doesn't have hunger cues until the evening when, you know, she's ravenous. And she's like, and now I'm actually, she was like, bro, my stomach grumbled at lunch today. And it was so cool because I was like, oh, I'm actually hungry because I've been eating, you know, more regularly throughout the day. And so like those hunger cues are kind of more noticeable. So I think that's kind of like one of the biggest things is doing that, or even setting alarms too, to just check in with yourself and ask like, what do I need? Because usually it's, you know, not just eating that gets kind of put to the side, but a lot of other self-care things. So just practicing pausing and like checking in with your body to see what you need. And like, it might be food, it might be water, it might be, you know, calling a friend or going and taking your dog outside, but just practicing that. And then that skill gets better. It's easier to kind of figure out, you know, what you need to do to meet your needs. Another thing would be like for stimulation, exploring just like emotional eating, like trying not to demonize that. Of the same thing with eating for stimulation, like that should just, it can totally be a tool in your toolkit. But like, what else can you add there? Whether it's like fidgets or movement or music. There's even like, if some people have like need a lot of oral stimulation, like it's called jewelry. So like jewelry, but with chew at the front. And it's like, it's made for adults, but you can chew on it. So that it just like, if you're genuinely not hungry, it can be, you know, a helpful tool. I have some clients who are like, this is really nice. I just realized that I wasn't hungry. I just wanted to chew on something. So like exploring some of those other things that you can add to that toolkit.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for sharing those because I think a lot of people need those tools and they also need to hear that it's like not something to be demonized because I think both in the dieting world but also a little bit in the anti-dieting world I think there can be a lot of pressure for people and maybe you've experienced this or seen people struggle but I think in intuitive eating specifically, there can be a little bit of shame around like, I don't feel my hunger cues and people are like, well, they're coming, don't worry. And I don't know. I've seen a little bit of the shame come from the anti-dieting space sometimes. So, how do you help people like navigate that?
Yeah. And I think this can be an area too for a lot of my clients where it's like a little bit adapted. Of like when we talk about emotional hunger, for some of my clients, that might be their only hunger cues, like noticing that they're hangry or like they're, you know, all of a sudden their mood just tanks.
Mhm.
Those sorts of cues sometimes might be the only cue. Like they might not get a growling stomach. It
Right.
might be those things. I know for me, like with my ADHD meds, I don't really feel like body hunger cues, but I get angry at the speed of my internet. And that's like just a pause moment. It's like, Becca, when did you last eat? And it's usually time to like go get a snack or eat something. And so I think it's important, like if an ADHDer never honored those like emotional hunger cues, they might not eat, you know, and end up under eating. So I think it's really important to be like, hey, all forms of hunger are very valid. And I
Right.
think the practical hunger piece, if you don't have hunger cues too, of like knowing, hey, I might not be hungry right now, but I know that like logically it's important for me to eat, you know, regularly throughout the day, and just honoring that can make it intuitive eating feel doable for someone who doesn't necessarily have like quote unquote normal hunger cues. Because yeah, sometimes they don't really necessarily come to the surface. I find a lot of times they do, or just learning some of the other hunger cues, like getting a headache or, you
Mhm.
know, feeling tired, even like, you know, having like an aching or gnawing sensation in your throat or like esophagus. And some of my clients are like, oh, I realized like my ears ringing is a big one.
Mhm.
And so I think it's interesting when you do that of like, oh, there are um, other signs of hunger too that like you might attach it to. I've had clients blame it on other things like, oh, I just needed more caffeine in the afternoon, and then they'll like switch it because they're getting a headache, and then they
Right.
switch to like a snack, and they're like, imagine that.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Because I do think that's a tough thing for even just people for who, for whatever reason, don't have hunger cues that are
Yeah,
quote normal.
yeah,
They can feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? And it's like, well, nothing's wrong, but like it's
yeah.
understanding, right?
Yeah, like if you've had food insecurity,
Hmm.
kind of trauma around food, then you like that could be another reason. Like really long history of dieting or disordered eating, like there's so many things that could contribute to that. And it doesn't mean you're broken or anything like that. Like just might mean you need some other tools or supports there to help.
Yeah, totally. Are there other, and I don't, this wasn't on the list, but it's just coming up for me. Are there other principles of intuitive eating that you find are especially challenging for ADHDers?
I would say um making peace with food, that one sometimes I think it's definitely challenging I think for everyone. But I think looking at it from the perspective too of like if you have like issues with executive functioning and cooking, is very challenging for you of like making peace with the foods that are accessible to you. So like if you can't prepare things in a certain way, or you don't have a lot of cooking skills or things like that, I think it's important to like focus on what is accessible to you.
Hmm.
So I would say that one's probably one that's a little bit more challenging. Movement is like movement can be a challenging one too, from like the executive function perspective of like task initiation, like getting started, that can make it hard, or the time management piece of like, being able to manage your day so you have time to do the things that you might do, that, like make you feel good. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing because I was curious, but I thought like the hunger cues was definitely one that I knew about, but I was curious about your professional opinion. Um, Perfect. So are there any like big myths or misconceptions that people have, whether they are an ADHDer themselves or whether they are maybe someone who helps ADHDers or has friends who know about it? Like, what are the big myths or misconceptions there?
ooh, yeah, I would say that a big one, like not even just related to food, but like that someone with ADHD is lazy or they're not trying. And I've seen that even in like the eating disorder space of someone having issues, maybe following a treatment plan and then being labeled as like non-compliant when it wasn't like their eating
Mm-hmm.
disorder causing those behaviors, but their ADHD, like, hey, the meal plan you gave this person was way too complicated, so they couldn't prepare the foods or do those things, and then so they didn't follow it, and then it just gets mislabeled as them like doing eating disorder behaviors when they're like, I'm genuinely not trying to do this. I
Right.
just can't, you like gave me a way too complicated meal plan, so it's just not going to work. I'd say that's a really big one. And then too, like seeing, I don't see it a lot, but like sugar or diet like causes ADHD,
Right.
and there really isn't research to show that like that diet does contribute to like, we don't really know what causes ADHD. There really isn't enough research to say like, yeah, it's diet's definitely a part of that. So that'd be a big one. And then I see a lot of like ableist language around like you can quote unquote like cure or heal ADHD with
Mm.
diet. And that I find just really sad and harmful too, because it's like our brains just work differently and diet's not going to literally change the structure of the like the things that's not structured the same as someone who doesn't have ADHD. Like you can't do that with food. So I think it's a little it can be really harmful to, especially I feel like sometimes even for kids, of feeling, I don't know if they necessarily see it because a lot of times they're younger when they do these like dietary interventions, and but it's like your kid doesn't need to be fixed, their brain's just different. um, and sometimes it's just a lot of stress too because they're usually like elimination
Hmm.
type types of diets, and for a lot of kids I'm like with ADHD are already at a higher risk of eating disorders too, so like is it really worth your like putting your kid on a super restrictive diet that like might like big like might and bold and underline help with their symptoms, or getting rid of them completely usually is probably not like what's going to happen for most people. So
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like even as a kid, I was seeing lots of that stuff. Like, kids shouldn't have sugar because it makes them hyperactive. And like, I don't know. I mean, like, obviously, sugar gives you like that jolt of glucose, but it's not like like you said, altering brain chemistry or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a very outdated viewpoint, but I think that it
Yeah.
persists.
Yeah, it does. Cause it's like, and I even see that with people being like, even if your kid doesn't have ADHD, they're probably going to get excited being around sugar and sweets because they're palatable. Like they're
Mhm.
tasty and they're like, it's a fun experience, especially with all of your, with all of your little friends. If you're at a birthday party or whatever, it's fun. So like, yeah, they're probably going to be excited around it. And it's kind of interesting too, the research actually shows too that like the restricting certain foods actually heightens the reward value of them, which means they're
Mm,
give your brain
interesting.
more dopamine, right? So like
Yeah.
if you're restricting those foods, you're putting them up on a pedestal and then you're causing someone to get more dopamine from them versus like making peace with those foods and just, obviously not eating sugar 24/7, but normalizing them. And there's probably a good chance that like, they're not going to be as rewarding of a food anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, yeah, those are I think we talked about a lot. I think both of us talk kind of fast. But uh there was something I was gonna say. Just yeah, just like what would you tell people, I guess? Like let's say, for example, there's like a person listening and they've just recently as an adult been diagnosed with ADHD and they feel like they are someone who has previously been navigating maybe some disordered eating patterns and is like ready to tackle this. Like what would kind of the first steps be, or what would be like the main pieces of advice that you'd have for someone in that position?
Yeah, I think especially if it's most of my clients are kind of in that binge restrict type of disordered eating. I think the first step of like giving yourself permission to like not diet or restrict, just like even if you don't have ADHD, if you're in that disordered eating space, I think the first step really is like evaluating your relationship with food. And for my clients, it's usually just like working on the behavior piece of things, like making sure you're eating enough, making sure you're eating regularly, and then we can kind of start to tackle some of those like maybe other thoughts or beliefs that might be kind of behind that too. So because I think it's kind of navigating for ADHDers, like what is coming from the ADHD and then what's coming from diet culture and kind of
Mhm.
untangling the two of those things, because some of it might be more related to like executive function or needing to all of those things we've talked about, or it might be there's still all the diet culture stuff that I
Right.
with under there. So it's kind of like having to untangle the two of those things and figure out like what goes with what and kind of addressing them each a little
Yeah.
bit.
And I guess like and I'm not super like familiar with the medical side of ADHD, but I guess like things around like the medications and like is weight loss not like a side effect of many ADHD medications, or like a correlation, I guess?
Um, I would say there is a correlation between weight loss. Like I think if I have a lot of clients who benefit from, not they're basically instead of self-medicating with food, the medication is giving their brain the dopamine that it needs. So a lot of them like I can actually eat like regular meals, throughout the day. I'm not just constantly grazing. I can actually like or I have the executive function to think through and plan and actually cook a nutrient dense meal instead of just going and getting fast food or something. Not that that's bad, but like that's the only thing you're relying on. It can. Vyvanse is one of the ADHD medications that's FDA approved for binge eating. But it only works when you're taking the medication. So like some I've had clients who have been taking it for binge eating and not didn't know they had ADHD and they're like, cool, I just don't eat all day. And then I eat like
Mm,
a little bit at night and we're completely under eating and like
right.
sure they lost weight, but they like or their binging would just get worse and worse at night because once the medication you can't be on it 24/7 because you wouldn't sleep. So, the evening time, if you're not actually addressing the binge eating,
Right.
what's leading to binge eating, then like once the meds wear off, you're probably it shortens the window you might be binge eating in,
Mm,
but it's not gonna like completely fix it. So yeah, weight loss can be there, but I think it's more so to just like it helps helps you start to do the things you actually want to be able to do. Because I think for a lot of ADHDers, it feels like there's all this stuff you want to accomplish, but you just you can't get it all done or struggle to figure out how to do that. So I think it helps in a lot of ways, in therapy too. I've seen a lot of messages recently that like doctors just want to put you on medication when you get diagnosed with ADHD and that's it. And I'm like, I don't know what part of the ADHD community you're in, but like, I'm like, it's a whole, it's not just one, that's like one tool. It is
Right.
like gold standard for treating ADHD, but therapy, there's coaching as well. So like therapy, I feel like it does more the emotional side of things. And then ADHD coaching is another great resource where it's just like helping you with like how to plan, how to get organized, how to prioritize, like how to manage your time better. It's just really helpful for like the more practical stuff versus like, you know, maybe the more like touchy feely stuff that you talk about in therapy. So I think it's nice to have like more than one, you know, treatment strategy there. So.
Yeah, totally. I just asked because I was wondering if it maybe was more related to like the decrease in appetite or decrease in hunger cues, or if it was just like something else.
Yeah, I think a little bit of like, obviously, if it suppresses your appetite, you're going to eat less. But I think that, and then the dopamine piece of like, if
Okay.
you're, you know, especially if you're more like a bit like medicating with food, then if that's not happening, you're probably going to end up eating less. But like, obviously, the purpose of stimulants is not weight loss, because I love people who, because of the like perceptions of stimulants,
Right.
will feel a lot of guilt or shame that like they got prescribed them and they haven't lost weight, or I've had clients even gain weight taking the medication, and they're like, I don't know, like that's not what's supposed to happen. Is there something wrong with me? And it's like, no, this is not. That's not the like intended use
Right.
of medication. So like, whatever your weight does is kind of, you know, that's what your weight does. If your weight obviously is your one of the reasons you have to be kind of followed by a provider, like I have to see my doctor every 3 months for my medication, is to make sure my heart's okay and to make sure that like my weight stays, you know, stays stable and there's not like some significant change in my weight.
Mhm. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's helpful for me, especially because I don't know as much, and maybe the listeners also don't know as much about ADHD. So, last question, I ask every guest this question, and that is, what is one thing you would tell your 18-year-old self about health or life or ADHD or anything at all?
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier this morning. I was like, man, this is such a good question. Um, when I was 18, life was very dark. That was like the depths of my eating disorder. And like prior to me getting my ADHD diagnosis, and I think kind of part of the or kind of getting an eating disorder was like everything felt chaotic in my brain. And I was like, and I can't control anything. I just remember having the thought, I can't control anything. So I'm going to control eating, like, because that's the one thing in my like day-to-day life that I can control. And it kind of became like my hyperfixation and went down a dark place. So I would say things get better and your whole life is not going to revolve around like trying to control your eating and the way that you look. I think, yeah, it gets better. So I wish I would have known intuitive eating existed when I was 18. I guess that would have been a good one too.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Becca. Where can people find you and connect with you if they want to learn more about you or your services, or just to get some inspiration? Because you share a lot of really great tips on Instagram.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I am most active on Instagram at ADHD.nutritionist. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a DM. And I do offer like a free 30-minute discovery call if anyone is interested in working with me. And the link for that's in my Instagram bio.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll link that all in the YouTube description and the podcast show notes as well for people to find. Because yeah, I love your tips. Like ever since you like shared, there was like one infographic you shared, and I was like, you know what? I need to have drinkable yogurt in the fridge at all times because like I am so bad at eating lunch. So that was helpful.
Call lunch the forgotten meal. I think even if you don't have ADHD, like just the hustle culture of the world, like we just get going with the day and you just like all of a sudden it's, you know, 4 o'clock and you're like, oh yeah, there was that, I was supposed to, I haven't
Right.
really eaten anything. And yeah, like, yeah, there's so many good options now too for things that like you can keep on hand. And if you forget to eat, it's like, at least there's something in my fridge or in my pantry that like will help me out.
Totally. Yes. So everyone go follow Becca on Instagram and hopefully you can find her over there and check out what she has to say.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Donna.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here.